Hello, welcome back to the podcast. I am Lily.
And I'm Jess.
And we are going to do something really special today. Jess has been studying astrology, and not just any type of astrology, sidereal astrology as well. And we're going to explain a little bit about what that is before we dive in. But Jess today is going to be reading my chart live, which I don't know about you guys, but that's so exciting to me when I listen to episodes like that. I just love it. So we're super excited about this. But before we dive into my chart as an example of this different form of astrology, I just want to ask you, Jess, what is sidereal astrology and how does it compare to Western astrology? So most people probably listening are familiar with their Western astrology, just like the basic sun, moon, rising signs. And if you're not familiar with that, you can easily look it up online. But that's the typical, if you would agree, the standard type of astrology that most people know of. So if you wouldn't mind just giving us a little bit of a background on the differences and just anything else that you think is really important to know before we dive in.
Yes, absolutely. And everything you just said is accurate. So Western astrology is also known as tropical astrology, and it's it's like the mainstream form of astrology that's used out here in the West. And so sidereal astrology is actually a much older system, and it is used mostly in India, but there's different variations of sidereal astrology, which I'll talk about more in a bit. And the ones that they use in India are actually different than the one that I'm going to be practicing and using with you today. So the main difference is in tropical or Western astrology, all of the zodiac signs, so there's 12 zodiac signs, and they're all divided into 12 equal parts. So in accordance with the months. So every month, well, it's usually around the 20th of every month that we shift into a new zodiac season, according to Western astrology. And so around 2000 years ago, this form of astrology was created, and the purpose of it was to align the calendar with the seasons, like basically to simplify things, like to simplify the sky with the seasons. And it served a purpose. It, like, of course, dividing it into 30-ish even days and each sign holding 30 degrees, it's just simpler. And it did hold a purpose. There's a lot of conjecture around this, but it did serve a purpose in those times. The seasons were used to really help people understand how to work with like agriculture. So tropical uses the seasons of the earth. And what that basically means is that at the start of the spring equinox every year, when after a year, the sun returns to a point in the sky. And that is what is known as Aries season. So Aries season is always the start of the zodiac, no matter what system you're using. But the difference between tropical and sidereal astrology, or true sidereal astrology, which is what the system that I'm using is called, is that while tropical uses the seasons, sidereal uses like the actual visible sky. And the 12 constellations are all different sizes. And there's actually 13 constellations, not 12. And so this is something that's been discovered more recently, and it has been adapted into other variations of sidereal astrology as well, utilizing all 13 signs. However, Western astrology does not utilize the 13 signs. It keeps just the 12, right? So the reason why there's such a difference between these two is because the Earth's axis has shifted so much over the years that now the constellations have shifted in relation to their positioning to the Earth. Okay. So with sidereal and tropical astrology, there's usually a full sign difference between, what, for instance, you're an Aries sun in Western astrology, but you're a Pisces sun in sidereal astrology. And so that's, Pisces comes right before Aries in the zodiac wheel. So there's a full sign difference usually, but it also depends on the size of the constellation because all the constellations are different sizes. And you'll see that notated on the chart when I show it to you. And this shifts a little bit every year. Just because, again, the Earth's orbit in relation to the sun and the planets, it shifts every year. So it does shift, like the seasons shift a little bit, like within a few days every single year, according to this system, because again, we're matching the seasons to the actual cosmos in the sky.
Wow.
So to me, when I found this form of astrology, I was intrigued. And I also felt something really deep within my body around it. So my certification is actually through traditional Western astrology. And before we even dive into anything here, I also want to just encourage listeners to take everything with a grain of salt that we talk about today. And this is all about exploration. This is all about determining what is true for you. And that's a process that I've been in with, utilizing Western astrology or true sidereal astrology. And in my experience so far of sitting with my true sidereal chart, it has just felt so much more resonant for me. And so we're going to see today how it feels for you, right? Because you're familiar with your Western chart, but we're going to see how it lands. And so that's what I want to encourage everyone that's listening is like, that's what this is. It's an exploration. And ultimately you get to decide what is true for you. All I can say is that in my opinion, sidereal astrology, this form of it really gives us an invitation to connect deeper with the earth because it's connecting deeper with what is truly going on in the sky. So I'll just leave that there.
Okay. Wow. First of all, thank you for that, because just for the listeners, I don't know anything about sidereal astrology. Jess was the first person to even introduce me to it. So this is brand new for me. And all of the things that you said, Jess, were so intriguing, not to mention the spiritual significance of the number 13. It's a very feminine number. And I mean, we won't go there right now because we don't have time. But wow, I'm very intrigued. And right before we dive in, I just want to say this. I was out in the park this morning, just sort of like energetically prepping myself for this. And I was noticing myself feeling nervous, resistant, and just something that might be coming up for you as a listener, as you are kind of embracing this idea that maybe it wasn't what you thought, or that you weren't what you thought, or you weren't what you were told. I think in the spirituality space, we have access to these wonderful systems. And yet I feel like in this episode, there's really a huge opportunity to tap into what is actual resonance and really amplifying your own discernment. And how do you react when there's question around who you are or what your blueprint is? How much are you leaning on that to determine what you do in your life? And we all like to say, oh, it's just a tool. It's just a tool. But how many of us use that tool pretty heavily? And there's nothing wrong with that. And at the same time, you know who you are. And I think that is the most important thing to remember when we're looking into these super divine systems that have been given to us for our expansion, ultimately. So just sharing a little bit about my process and just diving into this for myself. And yeah, I mean, if we're ready, go ahead and take it away. I'm ready.
Okay. Well, before I do, I just want to say that was such an important point that you brought up, because when I first discovered this form of astrology, it shook me. And it was actually while I was doing my certification. And so I was mad, I was angry. I was like, I had to go through like the full range of human emotions around it before I came into resonance and acceptance. And before I was able to like really sit with it, and it caused me to question a lot of things. It was really disruptive. But so yeah, let yourself be in it. And I felt the resistance too, very strongly.
Yeah, because it's like, as someone, as like Jess and I are both in the spiritual space and using these systems like human design, the gene keys, astrology, to act as guiding sources in our life. And there comes a time, I think, too, where we have to reevaluate our relationship with those tools. But even more so, you know, allowing yourself to be open to the potential that there could be a deeper resonance is like, that's scary, and that can be hard. And so I was feeling that in the park. I was just like, like, I don't know. Because I think part of us is just like, okay, I just want to know who I am and run with that. But on this path, in general, there's always going to be opportunities to really enhance our perspective of our own selves. So I feel like that's really coming in for me today. And I just thank you for this opportunity. I feel so grateful.
Oh my gosh. Well, thank you for being so open and receptive to it and for pushing through the resistance, because I'm so curious to see how it's going to land for you.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Me
Okay.
too.
So for those listening, we are also, we share these videos on YouTube. So the video, if you want to watch it, I am going to be sharing Lily's chart so that you guys can see what it looks like, so that she can sit with it and see what it looks like. So we're going to go ahead and do that. But if you're listening, don't worry, you're not going to miss out. All right. So
Mm.
can you see the chart okay?
Okay. Yes. Yes, I can.
Okay. So for those listening, Lily is only familiar with what her sun sign is in this sidereal system, which is Pisces. But in Western, she's an Aries sun, a Virgo moon, and a Sagittarius rising, right?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. So I'm going to just tell you your sun, moon, rising off the bat, and then we'll dive in. So as you know, your sun is in Pisces.
Yes.
Your moon is in Leo.
Okay.
And your rising is in Ophiuchus. Ophiuchus is the 13th sign. However, she's actually not the
Whoa.
13th sign. She's the 9th sign.
Okay. Okay.
And this is why I was so freaking excited to share this with you, because Ophiuchus is, we're going to talk more about her, but she's actually representative of the dark feminine. And she shares the point in the sky with Scorpio.
Okay. I'm just gonna try to I'm gonna try to stay with this because I'm already feeling like a lot. So go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay, so yeah, so again, for those listening, this form of astrology, the constellations are all different sizes. And so we go based off of the different sizes. And so you can see that depicted in the chart here, how Virgo is spanning a much bigger piece of the chart than like over here is Ophiuchus and Scorpio.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for saying that. I was like looking at the pieces and I'm like seeing different, lengths of time. So very interesting.
Yep, no, that's accurate. And so this form of astrology still utilizes the 12 houses. The 12 houses represent the different areas of life. And so this is determined, like the way that we find this is by knowing your actual birth time. So, and that also determines your rising sign, which determines which sign is in each house in all variations of astrology. And so we still are going to be using the 12 houses, and basically the planet placements. This is going to represent the different areas of life that the qualities and attributes of these planets like bring to that area of life and the purpose behind it. So it gives us more direction in utilizing this tool and how to like implement it into our life. So for those listening, if you're not super familiar with astrology, I'm going to be diving deeper into the specific houses that are relevant to Lily's chart.
Okay.
So let's get started.
Okay. Okay.
Sun in Pisces. Okay. Pisces is it's the most spiritual sign of the zodiac. It's the sign of the mystic. People with their sun in Pisces, this is where you are really meant to shine. Like you have these natural gifts of intuition, of being compassionate, very empathetic. It's a water sign. So this water, we bring in the elements, the 4 elements with astrology, and I'll talk about that as we go. But it's very, the different signs are very connected to their elements. And so being that it's a water sign, it indicates softness, adaptability, being really attuned to like the depths of life. And when you think of like the ocean, what's underneath it, right? That's Pisces, because Pisces is also all about the subconscious, the dream state, what's unseen. And so with you having your sun there, that's really representative of like you're really meant to shine with using your intuition, using your ability to like almost see beneath the surface, and your receptivity, your imagination, your ability to feel really deeply. That is a Pisces quality. These are your greatest gift, that you're really meant to let the world see you in that way. And also really meant to grow into that. The sun is also what we're meant to grow into as well. And it's also about going with the flow of life. The symbol of Pisces is the fish. So when you think of a fish, you know, going with the flow of a river, that's Pisces. So how's that sitting for you?
Yeah, well, first of all, I've never heard of like the sun that you grow with it, because that's an interesting concept that I've never really touched on for the sun. And yeah, I don't think I've talked about this on the podcast, but one channel that's really open for me when it comes to my intuitive gifts is the dream state. And so that definitely resonates. And yeah, rivers are a huge sign for me. I never really thought of myself as a Pisces, obviously, because I'm an Aries sun in traditional Western astrology, but I will say that dream part and that flow to my energy. I actually had a really amazing session with a healer, and she was sharing with me my energy flow is actually horizontal, like a river. It's like a horizontal flow. So very interesting.
Wow, that's
Okay.
so interesting. But with your sun, so it's placed in the fourth house. So the fourth house, wherever your sun is placed in your chart, it indicates what area of life like gives you energy, what area of life lights you up. And because when you think of the sun, it gives us that energy, right? When we feel the sunshine, it's like it photosynthesizes us. It gives us, it just, it feels so good. And so with the sun here, it's an area of life, like the fourth house is really representative of matters pertaining to the home environment and really building a steady foundation for yourself. So this is a soul house. It really runs deep. It's about building that foundation, but it's also about like reflecting on the past and really integrating yourself and how can you utilize your past and like what you've learned to integrate and like move forward in life basically and help you build that foundation. It's about being really reflective. It's a very feminine house, traditionally ruled by Cancer. So again, it's also about ancestry. So you could have also came here. I mean, you have a stellium, which basically means that you have a cluster of planets, which not everybody has in their chart. You have a cluster of 4 planets plus your south node all in the fourth house in Pisces. So this is massive for you in this life. And what I would say for that is like seeing that stellium is also potentially, here to do ancestral healing. In a really positive way, right? And really bringing like the peace and the compassion of your Pisces sun into matters of the home, into matters of family, whatever that looks like for you, cultivating a family life that feels really nourishing for you. It's also very like mama bear energy, very leader of the pack, the fourth house. So feeling that like leadership role could be pretty prominent for you when it comes to building your home life.
Whenever I listen to people speak, especially like in this context, I always have things that are triggering me, like my body. For anyone listening, if you're feeling resonance on certain things, I would write them down because you will not remember after the episode is finished. So you might, if you're watching the video, you might just see me take a note because as Jess is talking, like my body is actively responding to her. And so it can be really helpful, even as a listener, to take notes when you feel different hits come in and start to piece things together, even for yourself, because you might have a similar placement to this as well. So
Yeah, definitely. So is there anything that like wants to be said around that?
yeah, the ancestry piece is important. I can feel the importance of that. And when you said that there's a cluster there, yes, it feels very, yeah, like lineage based. Uh, and an interesting spin to that, with the idea of bringing in my compassion, because I am so compassionate in so many ways. And like I said, never really leaned into any Pisces energy intentionally. So that's definitely an invitation to explore.
Oh my God, I love that. I love hearing like feedback from people because, this isn't the intention of this isn't like telling you how to be or anything. And it's really interesting to hear how it manifests for people. And so like when I'm giving people interpretations, it's a beautiful channel of feedback for me, to see how does this manifest? What does this look like? But that is so interesting because, the sun, again, what you're really meant to grow into, what I mentioned before. And that's why a lot of people feel that they don't really resonate with their sun signs. It's like you really are meant to grow into that. And so the piece about you saying it feels like an invitation, that feels very aligned with that.
Yeah, yeah, and also, yeah, for sure. And then in terms of the ancestry, just having the South Node there, what I've heard is it represents past life experiences or past life gifts,
Yes.
that are here to kind of like help you move towards your North Node. And so I feel like that just checks with what you were saying around the ancestry piece too.
Absolutely. So the South and the North nodes, everyone has them in their chart, and they are very indicative of your purpose in this life. And just like you said, South node it indicates past lives. It also can indicate, because some people don't resonate with past life, but it also can indicate um experiences earlier on in this life. So childhood. But I do feel for you, this feels very past life.
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
mean,
I could imagine maybe could it be like if you're not in resonance with the idea of past life, could it just be like your innate gifts that you feel like you're really good at just naturally? You don't have to work at it. Things that you're really comfortable with. Would that kind of be on par
yes.
with the South Node?
Yes, absolutely. Things that come so naturally to you. And again, but it could also be some experiences that you had really early on in your life in this life. So, I mean, we can just go there if you want. Do you want to just go to the South Node?
Sure.
South Node, North Node? I like to let these flow intuitively. So, I mean, since we're talking about it, it's really interesting because the South Node here, being that you have so many planets here, this is going to be really a big area of focus for you in this life. However, it does need some balance, which we're going to talk about with your placements in the 10th house of Virgo. We're going to talk about how you can balance this energy. But with your South Node here, South Node in Pisces it really indicates a past life of literally being like a mystic and having and what those natural gifts are for you or likely for you, which I'll ask in a moment if this resonates, but it is having these natural gifts of intuition, of empathy, of compassion, and really just being able to see people and hold space for people in that way. Does that resonate?
Yeah, when we're thinking about like earliest childhood stuff, my intuition was really connected to animals more so than people. I don't know if that's a Piscean quality, but yeah, really connected to animals. And obviously, I do energy healing now. I don't think that a lot of people realize that they're intuitive. And I was definitely one of those people that didn't really realize and also didn't really like tap into it in any way that was intentional. But when I first started stepping into the spiritual space, I, was a client and I was working with energy healers. And I just remember a lot of healers saying, like, hey, you're really intuitive. And me just kind of being like, me? Like, really? And and kind of knowing that on some level, but also in a point of time in my life where I was really healing and disconnected in ways. And so hearing that feedback was really helpful for me to kind of like come back to that innate sense of intuition. But I will say I definitely felt very intuitive as a kid when I was with animals specifically, to the point where people would comment, and it was something that I didn't recognize as like a gift necessarily, just something that I was attuning to.
Yeah, and that's so fascinating because the way that I see that manifest in your chart is actually through your Neptune placement, which is right here. It's in the second house.
Mm-hmm.
And so Pisces isn't, I've never heard it specifically be connected to animals, but it's kind of like everything, like everything and everything,
Yeah.
it really represents like oneness and understanding that we are all one, that we are all extensions of source. That's very Piscean. But the fact that your Neptune is in the second house actually is traditionally a Taurus ruled house. So it has all those Taurus qualities, which is like the natural, dealing with matters of the natural world, animals. And with Neptune being the ruler of Pisces, your Neptune placement actually is really indicative of how you find your connection to source, your connection to your intuition. And so with it being in the second house, that is matters of the natural world. That is like, for you, it sounds like animals.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, because so can you explain to the listener, isn't Neptune the ruler of Pisces? And so like that's why you look to that
Yes,
to like
that's why I made the connection. So we can get a deeper insight. Every zodiac sign has a ruling planet, and you can get deeper insight into certain aspects of your chart by looking at, let's say for instance, you're like, oh, well, this is Gemini right here. And then the seventh house is one-on-one relationships. I really want to deepen into my one-on-one relationships, call in love. Okay, well, Gemini is predominantly taking up your seventh house. The ruler of Gemini is Mercury. So we're going to actually look to Mercury, which is in your fourth house of Pisces, as to, potential ways of how you can call in a partner. And Mercury is the communication. So you can basically look to the ruling planets of every zodiac sign to get some deeper insights. And that's just where I made that connection, was based on what you said. I was like, oh, well, that actually makes sense because Neptune is your connection to it. Well, for everyone, it's our connection to our intuition, and it is the ruler of Pisces. And yeah, that placement, it just represented that based on what you told me.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I love it. I did know that. I did know that you could look to the ruling planet to find deeper insights, but I didn't know that the second house was the natural world.
Yeah, that's actually that's an interpretation that I recently came upon, and I was like, whoa, this feels, because it's also the house of self-reliance, of money, and really developing, that connection to money and being able to rely on yourself. But Taurus, it's a traditionally ruled by Taurus, and Taurus is actually the zodiac sign of the earth. So that's where that connection comes in. It's like people who have a lot of Taurus placements, or a lot of Taurus. I mean, we all have every zodiac sign. We all have the energy a little bit in our charts, but the planet placements really bring them out in different ways. And so people that have a lot of placements in Taurus usually are like, I mean, I know you're very connected to the earth as well, but you also have Venus in Taurus, which we're going to talk about. But people with a lot of Taurus energy in their chart usually are very connected to nature, very connected to the earth.
Okay. Yes, that makes a lot of sense. Yes.
Yeah. So, okay. So just kind of back on the topic of the South Node in Pisces. So the South Node also, for everyone, is also really representative of, like, we tend to carry some shadows of whatever sign it's placed in, and that's because it's our South Node. So we're really meant to let go of those shadows and just take on the gifts that the South Node offers us to bring that into our North Node, which we'll talk about in a second. But the shadows here of Pisces include self-isolation, escapism, withdrawing from the world or society because of your spirituality, like maybe feeling like you just don't belong because you're like, I'm really spiritual, like this, I just don't fit in with the regular, with society as it is. And this also can speak to like a past life of, being a witch and like being hunted and having that. And in the past, a lot of mystics were hunted and killed for their intuitive gifts. And so I don't know if that resonates with you, but that can speak to that. And with it being in the fourth house can really speak to being overly attached to the family unit and also self-isolating in the home or being too stuck in the past. And so these are all things that like you're really not meant to hold on to too much and really learn to find a balance there because your sun is also there. So it is about learning to like reflect on your past, do that ancestral healing, but not get stuck in it. And so that's something that you're going to have to be really, really careful about with this placement just because your south node is there.
Okay.
How does that feel for you?
Yeah. You know what's crazy? I was literally thinking that I need to do a live around exactly what you're saying in terms of like the shadow of Pisces, which I think can be kind of addictive
Yes.
sometimes.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Like
Definitely.
addictions. And it's more so this feeling that I know well of getting sucked into lower frequencies, kind of losing self a little bit. You said Pisces is around oneness, but there's definitely a higher frequency of that and a lower frequency of that. But this kind of, yeah, like escapism, fuel wrapped into addictive patterns, especially around things of the past. But it's an energy that I am familiar with and have seen in myself for sure.
Wow. Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing all of that. And it's interesting because it makes me think of your Saturn placement because your Saturn placement, the glyphs are kind of off. So it looks like it's in your third house of Aquarius, but it's actually not. It's matched with this little dash right here.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So these are all in your fourth house of Pisces. But your Saturn placement, so this can be good and bad, right? All of this is everything in a chart is dependent on free will. Like we all have the choice of how these planets and these signs are going to express in our lives. And you touched on this in the not too long ago that like there's a higher expression and a lower expression of every sign and of every planet. And so with Saturn is the planet of boundaries and of really learning your boundaries, of really like setting the, setting the tone for things. And so with Saturn here in its highest expression, Saturn is going to be really boundaried when it comes to family life, when it comes to really creating a strong foundation for yourself. And what I would say for you is like, yeah, seeing and acknowledging all of those, shadows of the South Node in Pisces that we just talked about, but being able to like pull yourself out of them and being like, whoa, okay, I know, what I'm capable of, and I know that I don't have to stay stuck here. And so that's like, I see Saturn in Pisces in its fullest expression, really helping you with creating that boundary, that awareness. But it's also going to bring a lot of tests for you. Wherever Saturn is placed in your chart for anyone, it brings a lot of tests. So for a Saturn in Pisces in the fourth house, I would say this can be tests to your intuition, to trusting your intuition, and tests, within your family life, and also within what you want your family life to look like. And it's about learning how to overcome those and almost become, we kind of talked about this the other day, but kind of mastering it in a way.
You know what? As you were talking, I was like, oh my gosh, I just felt this wave of emotion and gratitude for Saturn, a wave of it. And I realized Pisces is deep. There's depth there. And this is just intuitive off the fly reaction to what you're saying. I could really see Saturn coming in and like being my anchor because there was many times in my adolescent where I wouldn't say lost in my life, but just lost within myself. Just this like minutia of depth. And it was really when like, yeah, like those boundaries for myself. That's when I actually started being like my highest expression intuitive. And I don't know, I just felt like this like wave of emotion for Saturn because like it was so tangible when the boundaries came in with myself, like coming from my own willpower too, my own self-worth of, okay, these are my boundaries with myself.
Yeah. And I also think that Saturn gets a bad rep. Like Saturn is always, it is the planet of limitations, and it is where we are again tested, but there's so much beauty in it. And so what you said about like you felt Saturn's presence and everything, yeah, like it is it's a beautiful planet, like they all are. And so I think that was really great that you mentioned that. This also speaks to potentially, and tell me if this resonates or not, because it has resonated for quite a few people that I've read for, but wherever Saturn is placed in your chart, it speaks to just developing like a little bit later on in life in that area of life. So like for you, this could be maybe you settle down with your home life and buy a home later in life, or, maybe you want to be a little bit more nomadic than what's conventional, or it could even speak to wanting to be a mother later on in life than what's conventional. And I don't think we've ever talked about if you want to be a mom or not, but I'm curious how that lands for you.
Yeah, that's interesting too, because that resonates for sure. That has been, I wouldn't say it's like a hurdle, but definitely something that I'm like, okay, don't feel like I'm in that chapter. Just don't feel like I'm there yet. And yeah, in high school, like that kind of age, I never really resonated with being a mom. And a lot of my friends would be like, can't wait to be a mom. And I was just like, like,
Yeah.
not to say that I wasn't into being a mom, but it just wasn't the thing that I was looking forward to the most. The thing that I was looking forward to the most was just like exploring, adventuring, just getting to know myself more versus being a mom. I've had a lot of conversations around this recently. I still feel like there's a lot of different places that I want to live and a lot of things that I want to experience before that time in my life. I think, later in life is definitely relative. What feels later to some people might feel right on time for another person.
Yeah. And what I would say is Saturn is encouraging you to allow yourself that acceptance that it sounds like you've had innately within yourself. Like you've had this, desire to just explore an adventure for a while. And with your Saturn placement here, it's like, yeah, like, great, let's do it. But what I will also say is like what you said, this is where it comes in of don't let your birth chart dictate your life, right? Just because that's placed here doesn't mean that you have to become a mom later on, but it's just kind of like, it's giving you that empowerment of like, yeah, I can do it in my own time,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, love that.
whatever that means to you. And that's for everyone listening. Because what Lily said at the beginning of just you basically, in so many words, we're talking about giving your power away to spiritual tools. And that is not what we're encouraging here. And I think that that's something that is not talked about enough in the spiritual space. And that is something
Definitely.
like we will probably do more episodes on this because Lily and I have had a lot of conversations like off camera about this, and we both feel very strongly about it. And I am actually going through my own journey with that right now of really calling my power back with my spirituality. So anyways, that's a whole nother story, but just to touch on that.
Yeah,
So,
felt a lot of excitement for you in that. Like psh.
oh yeah, it's been a whole thing. So yay. Okay. So how does Saturn feel complete for you? Does that feel good?
Yes. Yes. So interesting.
So
Yeah.
Okay, so while we're in Pisces, we're gonna jump to Virgo after just because it's the energy that balances your Pisces stellium. But while we're here, I want to talk about Mercury and Mars as well. So we'll start with Mercury. Mercury is the sign of communication. It speaks to your message in life. It speaks to how we communicate as well as like your way of thinking. And so with your Mercury in Pisces, this really tells me like it really speaks to the dreamer archetype in the way that you think. It tells me that you really do have like big dreams and you let yourself go into the fantasy of things. That's what I would think with this placement. And it also tells me like that you're someone who's very compassionate and empathetic, specifically in the way that you communicate with others. That's definitely a gift that you have. And your message really lies here in helping others to find that peacefulness in life within themselves, right? Helping them find that connection to something greater than themselves. That's very Pisces. whatever that looks like to them, and just being able to see the bigger picture in life. That's also very Pisces, like being able to like zoom out, see the bigger picture. And then with it being in the fourth house speaks to it being really like, I can see you being very nurturing of others in just being like very receptive and communicative with others, and really being able to like effectively guide others using your communication in a very nurturing way.
Mm.
How does that feel for you?
Yeah. This is the second time this has come through around, it's like a part of my purpose, this harmonizing people's emotions almost. When you said helping people find that peace within themselves,
Mm-hmm.
that was very directly connected to something else that had come through for me recently with a mentor that I work with. And hearing it twice, it's like, okay, get it. Every time that you're like sharing, it's just like my mind is getting like, it's just like opening. But yes, in terms of the dreamer archetype, totally, totally, totally. It's really funny because this is kind of a personal thing, but my partner, he's mentioned that about me. I just remember him saying like, how do you think up this stuff? Oh, and my love for like fantasy and Disney movies and like that kind of stuff. Like for instance, like he can barely sit through it, and I'm just like enraptured, you know what I mean? So like that stuff always appeals to me, and it doesn't for everybody. Like it just doesn't. And I think, yeah, there's definitely a fluidity to how I process and think about things,
Mm-hmm.
that I think is conducive to my love for that beauty that is portrayed in those kinds of films. For instance, I've been really drawn to watch The Little Mermaid again, and I feel like that's obviously a very Pisces ocean thing.
Oh, and I love what you said about the fluidity and how you think. That is so representative of like Pisces being a water sign. So that was like that was just on point.
Mm-hmm. So is Mercury like the thinking process and the speaking process, or is it more just like the communication?
It's both.
Okay.
Yeah, and it also speaks to how you like to learn too. Um,
Mm.
so this could be like um liking like learning in a very feminine way, almost like a way that's not super cut and dry masculine, like sitting at a desk. I would say that that's probably not resonant for, and tell me if this is accurate for you or not, but like what I would say for someone in Pisces is almost wanting to learn through their intuition and just wanting to approach learning in a very intuitive way and be like, okay, I intuitively want to learn this now, and now I want to learn this, instead of like having things like laid out for you.
Hmm. Yeah, I would say for me, I can be quite studious. I do like the structure of school. And yet, when I'm learning in my life, like learning who I am, like learning about myself, it's
Interesting.
always an intuitive process. And I felt like I've been pushed to lean into that more and more of using my intuition to learn things, like following my intuition into something and then learning about it, and then following my intuition into another thing and learning about it. So,
Yeah.
like, it's like with my spiritual development, with my spiritual path, that has been very intuitively led, and that feels very safe.
Mhm.
Whereas for traditional academics, that I'd say, I did enjoy having a structure that I could be within, but for my like soul and like for my spiritual way, it has to really come from me.
Okay, wait, this is so, because I'm realizing as you're saying this how it's manifesting in your chart. So, and like again, this is like I learn so much when I interact with people like this. Like that's why I'm
Yeah.
like, this is always like a two-way thing. So fourth house, your Mercury is placed in the fourth house, which is a soul house. Like it is learning about your soul. And then your third house, which is the third house is traditionally a Gemini ruled house, which means that it's traditionally like the house of Mercury, because Mercury rules Gemini. It's actually ruled mostly by Aquarius and a little bit by Capricorn, which are both masculine energies.
Okay.
So
Interesting.
yeah, and so I'm like, wait, okay, that makes sense, and that's like a learning point for me, because that shows specifically where, because it's indicative of Mercury specifically being in your fourth house.
Mm.
That makes sense.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was really cool when you were
Yeah.
saying that. I was like, wait, actually, I can see that in her chart.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that's amazing. Because
Because
I was like, yeah, I was like, yes and no,
yeah,
like in terms of like the different areas of my life.
yeah, because Capricorn's very traditional. And then Aquarius is very I wouldn't say studious, but like they're both masculine energies. So it's like
Yeah.
they both like Aquarius is an air sign, so it's like very like communicative. And then Capricorn is an earth sign. So it's like that more methodical, organized way of being. And so both of those,
Wow.
yeah, rule your third house, which that can speak to that aspect. So that's so interesting.
Love that. Wow. So the third house is like school.
Third house is school. It also relates to siblings, school, and like earlier communication, ways of learning. Like school earlier on in life though. And then ninth house is actually related more to like higher education, and like just like how you want to further your education,
Okay.
basically.
Got
Yeah,
it.
because the 12 houses are also basically like representative of different phases that like our soul goes through as we evolve. Does that make
Mm.
sense?
Yeah. So it's like kind of age dependent or not really?
Somewhat. It's like we start in the first house, and this is where like we start to learn about ourselves, and we start to learn about, what, who are we, like how do we assert ourselves, how do we present ourselves into the world. And then once we kind of learn that, we progress to the second house, which is all about learning our values in life. Like what is that, what do our values look like, how do we want to become, reliant on ourselves, like how are we going to deal with like the financial aspects of things, the more 3D aspects of things. Like we're starting in the 3D, right?
Right.
And then you progress into the education. How do we communicate with others? It's these two are about the self. Then we get into interpersonal in the third house.
Wow.
And that's still a little more like quote unquote 3D, because then in the fourth house is when you start diving deeper into the soul, going into the past, building the foundations of family. And then the fifth house lightens up a bit, and that's about our creativity, our joy, having fun, bringing romance into our life. And
Mm.
it like goes on. But does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and I'll just say one other thing about the fourth house since I have so much energy there. I really do feel like my life so far has really been about building a foundation within myself. And like every child, every dark night of the soul has just been like another layer of foundation within myself. Very interesting. Anyway, I'll let you go on.
No, yeah, I love hearing. I love this. I love the open dialogue. I'm here
Me
for it.
too.
That's amazing. Yeah, so you definitely have it's a big part of what your soul came here to do, is learn that foundation within yourself. So, and then lastly, we'll talk about Mars. And so Mars is so it's more of like our inner masculine energy. It's how we assert ourselves. It's also our intrinsic motivations. It also speaks to like our more primal instincts. It's also like the planet of sex, like our sexual nature. And so the shadows of Mars are anger and aggression. And this can show up when the needs of Mars aren't getting met. So we can talk about that a little bit more. But with Mars and Pisces, this actually like softens the masculine nature of the planet a little bit. Like I would say, like you definitely have that inner masculine, as we all do, but I would feel it almost just being a little more intuitive, a little softer. And then really, really desiring to like take action on things when you feel very like spiritually connected to it, is what I would say with like your Mars here.
Wow. Okay.
It's also like really indicative of someone who really lets their intuition lead the way, which based on what you talked about before sounds true for you. And
Yeah.
yeah. And then in terms of like sexual attraction, right? That would be like Mars place here would be like your emotions are going to be strongly involved in that. And also like definitely indicates you You likely feeling safer to open in this way to others when you feel very trusting of them. And like when you have that emotional connection, like very, very deeply though, like in general, I would say women to open up sexually need that emotional connection. But with Mars and Pisces, it like, no, this shit runs deep. Like we're talking like this shit runs deep. And so I'm just gonna say that, like, really, really, like, I feel like you're gonna have really high standards in that aspect of like, hey, can you fucking hold me? Because I need you to show me that you can hold me, and you're not gonna fuck around with that. That's what I see in this placement, which is not bad, right? That's just intrinsic to like who you are. And again, you can tell me if that's right or not when I'm done, but it's also really requiring a deep presence from people, just because like Pisces is all about that presence as well. But it's really important to cultivate a deep presence within yourself in order to not see others through rose-colored glasses, because one of the shadows of Pisces is seeing other people through rose-colored glasses and kind of like being a little naive. And so the way that you can like overcome that is through cultivating that deep presence within yourself, which you literally just said you've been doing your whole life.
Trying.
Trying. Yeah, it's a never-ending
Yeah.
journey.
Yes.
So how does
Okay.
that feel for you? I just went off.
Okay. Geez. People are gonna learn a lot about me during this episode.
This is getting a
We're
little
covering.
personal, but we don't need to like talk about anything.
Yeah.
We can also edit things out if we need, if you decide we, you know.
Yeah. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely with the, yeah, like, okay, so it's the sex piece, it's the intermasculine. Yeah, and so I'll start with the intermasculine. This is reminding me of some of my gene keys, honestly, but with my intermasculine, I feel like I haven't found that place that my intermasculine wants to be yet. I feel like there's a part of me that's like hyper masculine or no masculine at all. You know what I mean? And I'm realizing based on this interpretation that it's because my inner masculine is supposed to look different than what may be shown or taught.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So that might be big. So yeah, I feel like this is a whole new learning situation that is open now. And then with the sex piece of Mars, totally. Yeah, like I remember, in college, people are finding themselves in that way. We're like finding our sexuality maybe for the first time. Maybe for others, it's not the first time, but like maybe for some it is. Or like end of high school, we're kind of stepping into that part of ourselves. And I remember being like very, very emotionally protective of myself, like in relationships in general, especially when it came to physicality of things.
Yeah.
And yeah, like always feeling like what you said, the need for really deep presence. I can't even tell you how many times I'm like, are you with me right now? Are we connected or like, is this not? I never really had any kind of trials when it came to hookup culture
Yeah.
because I just couldn't get behind it. I literally felt like it was pointless for me because it just did not fulfill anything in me. Like
Yeah.
without that piece of connection emotionally, there wasn't anything that I was gaining from it really. Like, which I guess is maybe like an interesting thing that maybe not all people can relate to. Like you said, like women, I think that there's always like some sort of emotional piece that most of us need to feel safe.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was really interesting for me in that space of college and like going out with my girlfriends and like, meeting men and having boyfriends and dating. I think that can be a challenge for people working through that dynamic within college, especially like hookup culture and like where to find footing in that. But what I always really desired, like the first desire when it came to like relationship and intimacy, was always the emotional connection. And so that was such a guiding force for me.
Wow. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. And it's really interesting what you said about like you were very protective of yourself in that way because it is a
Yes.
fourth house. And the fourth house is a Cancer, traditionally Cancer ruled house. Cancer is very protective. Like
Mm,
Cancer's mama bear energy. Like, like, don't fuck with my cubs,
yeah.
very protective. And so that was just such an interesting point that you said of like how that manifests because of that placement in the fourth house. So I totally see that. And it's also really beautiful that you are at such a young age that connected to it and that connected within yourself, because I think that at that age and at that point in our lives, I mean, speaking from my experience, it can be really easy to kind of just like not stay true to yourself in certain ways. So I think that that's really beautiful that you were able to still stay true to yourself in that way and withhold that.
Yeah, thank you for that. It was so much easier to lose myself in other ways looking back on my journey, but for that piece, there was a strong like firmness to that protectiveness around my emotions, my physicality, intimacy. It was very much like what you were saying, that Saturn energy. It was very much a boundary for me and not something that I ever really even desired to push. Like it was like my boundary with that was coming from a very internally sourced place that was in true alignment with what I actually wanted. And I think that that can be a hard thing. Sometimes we make boundaries when maybe we have a wounded desire for the thing. But for me, that boundary was true and resonant. It was very, yeah, like definitely a guiding force for me in my young adult experience.
And it's almost like that's how your inner masculine has held you your whole life.
Mm. Yeah. Wow.
Because like,
Wow.
you know, Mars, it does represent more of your masculine energy, and our inner masculine, just as the masculine holds the feminine,
Mm-hmm.
you know?
So interesting.
So just a
Yes.
perspective to offer.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. I love that.
Oh man, this is so fun. Okay.
So fun.
Okay, so you know, obviously with the fact that you have this stellium, this really, really, you have so much energy here. It is very important for you to focus on all of everything that we've talked about within Pisces in the fourth house. However, it's also very important for you to balance that Piscean energy, because too much of it is gonna like that's gonna like you're gonna be floating, right? If you have too much of it, which I mean, again, your planetary placements help you with that, like what we just talked about. But with any sign in the zodiac natal wheel, we always want to look to the sign that's directly opposite of it to find balance. If we're ever feeling just like just if you're ever feeling like too much in that Pisces energy, you can look to Virgo, which is the sign directly opposite, and the house directly opposite is the 10th house, which is the house of your career.
Mm.
So this I find so interesting for you, just based on what I do know about you. And
Yeah.
for those listening too, I don't know a lot of the stuff that Lily is telling me. I haven't known it. Like some stuff,
Yeah.
yes, but a lot of it that we're talking about, I'm like, yeah, I did not know that. So it's just really interesting.
Yeah. Like a lot of this we have not discussed. I mean, like this would take without the
Yeah,
invitation, like when would we ever get to this, like these levels? You know what I
literally,
mean?
literally. That's why it's so interesting. Like it's just so cool to see
Yeah.
again how this manifests. But okay, so 10th house, and it's really cool because you have your MC, which for those listening, the MC is called the midheaven, and that point in the chart is representative specifically of career, and it's not always in the 10th house for everyone. But for Lily it is. And so we'll start there, and what this tells me is that your career is definitely going to have a lot of those Virgo qualities. You're going to have to be very organized in the way that you approach your career, but this is also about like practicality. This is about grounding your spiritual views and beliefs in a way that can be useful in the world. And so like when we think of Virgo, Virgo is earth, right? So it's about that grounding energy, and that's the beauty of this energy, is like you can take all of that dreamer energy that Pisces gives you, all those natural, that like that's a gift of yours, is to dream. And it's like, how can you utilize this Virgo energy that's also in your chart to actualize it, to make it real, to make it relevant in this life? And like that's actually something that you came here to do with your MC here. You came here to do that. And a lot of this is actually going to come through your healing journey, because Virgo is like the self-healer. Virgo is all about personal growth, personal development, personal healing. It's about learning how to become more discerning, not always letting your emotions have the upper hand. Like that's where the discernment comes into play, finding that balance, really accepting responsibility, and also like sticking to a plan and focusing on the details. So that's going to be like really important for you with specifically your career, since your midheaven is here. And that's how I would say, because, you know, we have our purpose and then we have our career. They're two different things. Because your career is like in my opinion, your career is more of like your contribution to the world. But it's really interesting because you have your North Node conjunct, which just means direct, your midheaven, which that's not the case for everyone. So we'll talk about the nuances there. But what's coming up for you as like based on everything I just said?
100%. 100%. That balance that you're saying is just so important. And I just had like huge confirmation as you were saying this, where it's like it is really I'm obviously lost for words here, but but there's so much explanation. There's so much explanation when I'm not like grounding it into the earth, when I'm not grounding myself into the earth, number one, when I'm not moving towards actual goals, it's we were just talking, like Jess and I are in a group together with some other women, and we were just discussing how I can kind of get lost in depth. Like we were talking about some things with grids and the earth, but I think it also applies to like my personality, where there is that balance is so important for me when I am moving towards something, when I am like using all of the things that you described in Pisces to move towards the Virgo, like that's when I feel good. That's when I feel my best. And it's like irreplaceable. It's irreplaceable for me. It's just so interesting because that Pisces energy has like really challenged me, just based on this interpretation of the chart system. Like that Pisces energy has been very challenging, and the Virgo energy along with the Saturn has been my boundaries, my stability, keeping me in a place where I'm like, okay, I can work with this. And yeah, I'm just feeling that a lot with Virgo. And I'll also say Virgo was my moon sign in Western astrology. And so now it's my midheaven and my north node sign. So Virgo has been in my is a placement in both of my charts, and something that I definitely resonate with. But the self-healer part was like very interesting, and that is so indicative of my story. I was in a long healing journey, and we all are, but a very intense healing journey for a while. So again, just very resonant.
Yeah, and it's so great that you brought up like your Western astrology as well, because usually if people like resonate with certain placements in Western, it's because of different placements in sidereal. And it's really interesting to see because they actually usually like you resonate with the energies, but how you use the energies is usually different. So for instance, like with your Virgo moon, that would be needing to be really methodical and analytical to your inner process and your inner world. Whereas with this is more outer facing. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
And we're
Yeah.
going to talk about your Leo moon and dive deeper into that. But yeah, and it's also like this is a point in your chart that's going to feel very uncomfortable for you, because North Node is like always stepping in outside of our comfort zone, no matter who we are. So it's like really like pushing ourselves to go there. But also you have Chiron directly conjunct. Chiron is the wounded healer. You have Chiron directly conjunct it's like on your MC. And so that is like it could be even more challenging for you. Basically what Chiron is, it's called the wounded healer. And what it indicates in our chart is a wound that you have through no fault of your own. And with it being in the 10th house, like I would guess you having some sort of wound around your public image and your career, and like feeling uncomfortable putting yourself out there in your career. But you came here to heal that. You came here to be an example for others in that way. And this is really important though, because also Chiron is retrograde, and anytime natal placements are retrograde, it means like emphasized, emphasized. And
Great.
so, yeah. And so, but the how of healing Chiron depends on what sign it's in. And so for Virgo, that's like focusing on that self-healing. And also Virgo is also the sign of being in service to others. And so this speaks to like using that self-healing work that you're doing to literally translate it directly into your career to be of service to others.
Mm. Wow. Wow. So I'm wondering, one thing I heard about Chiron is that the degree that it's at is like indicative of like, the age that the wounding happens, or is it not that way? Do you just like come into life with the wound?
Oh, that's actually I actually have never heard that before.
Okay. Yeah,
So I actually don't know.
it was I did like a webinar like years ago and she like mentioned that. I was like, oh, that's so interesting. I was just wondering what your take was on that.
No, I'm gonna have to look into that because I don't know, but that's like
Okay.
really interesting. And I need to run this through a different type of software because it doesn't tell me what I used, didn't tell me the degree point of your Chiron, but I'll have to run it through the software for that. But I'm gonna actually explore that because I don't know. But
Yeah.
that's like really interesting because I'd be curious, like for me, and then I'd be curious for you. Like, I'm just gonna start asking people.
I know.
Oh my God, this is gonna become an
So,
experiment, like or what's the word I'm looking for? It's gonna become what market research or whatever.
yeah, yeah. Market research.
Like
Yeah,
I'm
if any listeners want to be part of Jess's market research, please leave a review and we'll
Let
contact you.
me know. Because here's the thing too with astrology. It can be very subjective. And that's where I'm not sitting here saying like I'm preaching truth, right? Like I'm just like this is the information that I've found and this is what I found to be true for me. And that's why I don't know if everyone listening, like if you can tell, I'm very much so approaching it in a way of like asking Lily how that feels for her. Because it's like I don't know what's true for everyone. I only know what's true for my chart, and what's
Mhm.
true for me. So that
Yeah.
also goes back to the piece of coming back to empowerment with these tools. But that is so interesting. I am definitely gonna explore that because it wasn't in my certification course.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay. So yeah, so that's just very interesting how, you can utilize the Virgo energies to, I would say this is really like how you can channel your Virgo energy into that self-healing work, into your career. But then also with your North Node being here, this is to really teach you that your purpose, your way of being does not come from being useful to others. It's about being the best version of yourself and putting that out into the world.
Okay, that's a big one for me. For sure.
Yeah. And so I would say that with your North Node and your MC, like your midheaven so close together, I would guess that can be a challenge that you may run into, like whether you've already run into it or like you may continue to run into it. And so really reminding yourself like my value is in like how I be and it's not in what I do. And that's important because our purpose is not always our career and like in my opinion. And so with a North Node in Virgo, it really does speak to like that healing process, which your rising sign in Ophiuchus, which we'll talk about, is like really supportive of that. And that being your purpose here is just, I'm just like working on being the best version of myself. And that's all that matters.
Wow. Okay, I love that.
Yay. This is so great. Woo!
Yeah, that's big. That's big because that's been always a thing for me, like the limiting belief, I would say, or the limiting story for sure around like usefulness. And I think there's so much wrapped up in that from the society aspect. Don't really like the word programming, but there's so much programming around like what's useful and that kind of thing. So yeah, thanks for bringing that in.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad it resonated. Um, And just so let's talk about your rising sign, just because we just came off of Virgo, and then we'll talk about your moon, because moon is obviously a really important placement that we haven't gotten to. But okay, so you have your rising sign in Ophiuchus. And so I touched on it before, but Ophiuchus is the constellation that was omitted from the original creation of Western astrology. And those who have, oh, this is just so like, this is just so fascinating to me when there's significant placements in charts in Ophiuchus, because it spans a very short area in the sky. So it's more rare to have Ophiuchus placements. So let's talk about what Ophiuchus is. So Ophiuchus is the constellation. She is in between. And I say she because she represents, it's more of a feminine sign. And this is again like newer information that like we're all starting to learn. Like people who are coming across sidereal astrology, like we're still learning Ophiuchus because it's been omitted for so long. But the information that I found, the information that I found that I feel really resonant is what I'm sharing today. And I encourage everyone to do their own research as well. But it is the constellation in the sky. It's actually between Scorpio and Sagittarius. So Ophiuchus season comes just after Scorpio season and just before Sagittarius season. So people who are at the beginning of Sagittarius season in Western astrology are most likely, well, Sagittarius is a longer constellation. It just depends, but some Sagittarius suns might be an Ophiuchus sun. Like my partner, for instance, he's actually an Ophiuchus sun, which is really interesting. But yeah, so it just depends. But you can always look up your chart. I'm going to include where to do that in the show notes. So for Ophiuchus, the symbol is the serpent bearer or the snake bearer. Okay, and like the snake is the symbol of,
Wow.
one of the symbols of the divine feminine, right?
Yeah.
And what Ophiuchus, the element that Ophiuchus is said to embody is ether.
Mm.
So that's just really something to really think about. Like, it's not the traditional like sun, or not sun, earth, water, fire, air. It's ether, right?
Wow.
And so that's where it's like Ophiuchus is deep. Ophiuchus really like is said again to represent not only the dark feminine, but just the shadow side of the self. And what Ophiuchus, the power and the ability that Ophiuchus has, though, is to see all aspects of the self, to see all aspects of what it means to be human and to transmute it. Ophiuchus is that transformation process. It is the process of when the caterpillar goes into the cocoon to become a butterfly. Ophiuchus is when the caterpillar like turns into like goop and is literally transforming into the butterfly. It's the stage right before the butterfly emerges, which in this case would be Sagittarius. So that's like to give you just some kind of symbolization there. That's
Wow.
Ophiuchus. It's like that deep transformative state and embracing all of what it means to be human. Like, so for this as your rising sign is, it's known to be like the most sensitive point in your chart. It's how you approach life. It is also said to be the breadcrumbs to your purpose as to how you can move toward your purpose. And that's why I wanted to talk about it after us just talking about your North Node in Virgo, which is really interesting because Virgo is also the self-healer. It's like with this Ophiuchus ascendant, you're able to like just naturally take all of this, like every aspect of who you are, and just transmute it and heal yourself in that way. And Ophiuchus is the archetype of the healer. That's like one of the main archetypes of it. And so Ophiuchus also has a really strong desire to not only heal themselves, but to also heal other people, though. And so that's really, again, that breadcrumb to your purpose is like helping people to see all sides of themselves, to embrace, you know, that shadow side of themselves and guiding them on how to transmute it. That's Ophiuchus. And when you think of like the serpent bearer, I read this more symbology on this that I thought was really beautiful. It's like the snake, it sheds its skin, right? That like element of transformation, but it also always has its belly on the ground. So like it's still very grounded.
Hmm.
Which I read that and I was like, wow, that is just, it just hit me.
Yeah. Wow.
So how is this sitting for you? It's big.
Yeah. It's like intangible,
Yeah.
really.
Yeah, it is intangible. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't like, I mean, yeah, like I was just feeling really massive chills. And when you first said it, I had really massive chills, which I get a lot as like confirmation. But then I had like kind of like this, I don't know, like a pulse or something like that I was feeling. Yeah, I don't have words right now. I'm just gonna let it sit because I feel like that's a big thing within this chart system, maybe one of the most important things for me to feel into. Because you know what is really funny though, right as you started talking about it, I had like a little bit of a deja vu moment. And I'm realizing that probably years ago, because I have such a figment of this memory, I think I was on astro.com and I think I like click sidereal, like as like there's like some settings. And I think that maybe they did then, maybe they don't know. I have no idea if they have that now. So just take Jess's suggestion for the listener to find your chart. But like somehow I came across sidereal and I saw that. I
Oh,
saw
wow.
that I had Ophiuchus. And again, this is like when you said I had Ophiuchus, I did not remember this memory.
Mhm.
And then when you started talking about it, I had it trigger, like this memory trigger of I had seen this before.
Yeah.
And I remember seeing it. I remember being like, what? That's not even a sign. Like I remember, I
Yeah.
remember like, that's not even a sign. And I just wrote it off. I was just like, this is a weird system, whatever. I wrote it off. And just very interesting that it's coming back in. And I did not put that together. Like when you were saying, "Oh, I want to read your sidereal chart." I did not remember this until you were talking now. And I'm like, interesting because I remember seeing that black thing, like now, like very figment memory, but and faint. But I do remember seeing that and being like, is that a real thing? And then just kind of like writing it off because I'm like, I don't know what this is. But yeah, yeah, that's all I have to say right now.
Yeah, I mean, sit with it, it's a big revelation. Um, for me, I have my North Node in Ophiuchus, so I had a very similar like reaction because I was like, the North Node is also like a very important point in the chart, and like for it to be in that, I was like, what the fuck, like. And so I think just for anyone who has like because the ascendant is it's in a very big placement. Um, so it's just like anyone that has that, it is like a bit of a shock to the system, but it's also like so beautiful. I mean, I feel like you and I have both been on this like journey in deep, we've been journeying, I think, like deeper into our feminine, I feel.
Yeah.
And Ophiuchus, it really is, it's the feminine.
Mhm.
Um, and like we all have the feminine in us, right? I mean, like my partner, he's a man and he's an Ophiuchus sun, and it's just
Yeah.
so interesting. Um, but yeah, I mean, sit with this, and like I feel like you're gonna have so much unravel as time goes on. And that's for you to just uncover in your own time. And this is just again that invitation to do so. And that's where like the reason why I feel called to like share this form with other people is because of like the truth that I felt with it. Um, but also because of, when you look in the sky, if you ask astronomers, they're going to be like, yeah, Ophiuchus is a real constellation, and it's just like, how can we ignore that? And so
Mm.
to me, I mean, I have a Sagittarius stellium in my chart, in my sidereal chart, and Sagittarius, like also Scorpio, is truth seeking. And so I'm like, no, we have to talk about the truth. And again, there's truth in Western as well. It's like based on how you're using it. I'm not sitting here saying like, this is right, this is wrong. Like I'm never gonna be that way. It's just about finding what's right for you. And the tools are going to present themselves when you're ready.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you for sharing that because, yeah, you have so much Sagittarius, and I feel like it's really, if, for the listeners, and always tap into your own discernment, but like there are people here like Jess who are really here to trailblaze that truth and bring what their truth is to and teach that. And so that you can have a wider perspective of what is even a potential or a possibility. So I just want to thank you for doing this for us.
Thank you for that. I got like full body chills when you said that. So thank you. And it was really interesting because, in Western, for me, I have a Capricorn stellium, which again, the stellium is like a cluster of planets, but in sidereal, it's a Sagittarius stellium. And that was something that I was like, whoa. But it's interesting though, because it's like I have Saturn in Capricorn, because I was like, I still feel the Capricorn energy though. And having Saturn there, I mean, Saturn's like authority and everything. And I'm like, oh, okay, I get it with certain things. Cause I could never connect to my Capricorn moon. I was like, I just don't feel like a Capricorn moon. I don't feel like my inner world is Capricorn. I just don't feel that. And I'm actually a Sagittarius moon. And I'm like, oh, I feel that.
Yeah. See, I connect very deeply to my Sagittarius ascendant.
Like, okay.
In Western.
And that's actually because you also have Sagittarius ruling most of your first house. So like you have your ascendant in Ophiuchus. However, you're still going to feel, and you have Jupiter and Neptune in Sagittarius. So you're still going to feel that like aspect of like, since it rules most of your first house, like sidereal astrology is less cut and dry than Western. Yeah. So it's like you still have a lot of Sagittarian energy, and the way that you approach who you are and the way that you develop your self-confidence, you're still going to have that. Like Jupiter is it's the planet of expansion. It's how we expand and how we grow. And so like with yours in Sagittarius, this tells me that you're someone that grows when you're exploring, when you're adventuring, when you're traveling. That's big. When you're embracing your spirituality, and your independence. But it's also, it also shows where we can overdo it. And so with this placement, I would say be cautious not to drive into too much independence, because that can make you, that's in the way, that's, I would say, is how you could like overdo things. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So that's where it's like you still have prominent Sagittarius energy in your chart.
Okay. Yeah, because that's very interesting, because I have always felt, just like the desire to expand and travel specifically and just see new places. And I feel called to that a lot of the time. And so it made like a lot of sense as a ascendant.
Yes.
But yeah, interesting even having my Jupiter there, because I feel like what you said was that it makes that bigger almost. It's like making that energy, with the Sagittarius energy, bigger and adding momentum to it, or just more bigness. Is that kind of what you were?
Yeah, like Jupiter is expansion and abundance. That is like a lot. That clues you into a lot of how you expand and what makes you feel abundant.
Okay.
Yes. And then also it's so interesting because now we can talk about your moon. I love how effortlessly this has flowed, because your moon is in Leo in the 9th house. 9th house is traditionally the Sagittarius ruled house. So it makes so much sense. Like the moon is your inner world. It speaks to like what we're emotionally attuned to. It speaks to like what nourishes our soul on an inner level. And so with it being in the 9th house, for you, that is going to be travel. That's going to be experiencing culture. That's going to be like adventure, like needing to be adventurous in life. And what I would say for that is like, that's just what you need to do for you. You know, it's less about going and traveling like for your, you know, career. Like some people, if they had their midheaven here or whatever, I'd be like, oh, you're probably going to be in a career that causes you to travel a lot. For you, it's more about like, you just need to travel. It's just, this is you for you, you know?
Hmm. I'm like feeling really emotional on that.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah. Wow. Okay.
I'm getting emotional now.
Yeah, there's been like a couple things that you said that like another kind of sign for me, and just like sharing this for the listeners, as you obviously are probably here to expand your intuition in one way or another. You're probably interested in one of those kind of topics. But something for me that comes up as Jess has been talking has been tears, like almost feeling like I'm going to cry, or like feeling like a well kind of like open up in me. And if you're not watching the recording, then you wouldn't be able to see that. If you are watching the recording, you get to see that in real time, which I'm like, that's okay. I'll be the example, that's fine. But just sharing in real time, that is how my body kind of communicates with me around deep things that have been said that I'm responding to. So when you were saying that around the moon of like, oh, you just need to travel for you, that is like like a hiccup, almost just like a big emotion coming up. And usually that indicates a lot of depth when it comes to hitting a truth, or hitting something that hasn't necessarily been like spoken before, that is really like sparking my consciousness around it.
Oh, yeah. I mean, thank you for bringing that up, because I think that that can be true for like everyone, because that's like how I feel too. Like when I get really emotional about things, I'm like, whoa, that was real. That was real.
Mhm.
You know, it's like our bodies are so wise, they're so intelligent, and they speak to us.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'll also say too, it's not about me thinking about it and then having an emotional response. It's almost like an instantaneous kind of reaction. So this isn't like a product of a thinking process. And you'll be able to tell the difference. Maybe this already happens for you, or maybe this is something that is new to you. But there is kind of a difference between kind of working yourself into an emotional response, where that comes from the mind of like you telling yourself certain things. We've all like worked ourselves into different emotional responses based on maybe worries or anxieties, but this is more so like a live, in the moment, intrinsic triggered response that can happen in the body.
Absolutely. And I'm realizing that that is why we saved this for like in real time to share your whole chart with you, because Lily and I we were chatting and I was like, do you want me to tell you like just what your sun, moon, rising are? And she was like, I was like, I don't know. For some reason, I feel like you need to decide. And she was like, no, but I did end up just only telling her what her sun sign was. And so it's really cool that like for you listeners, like the fact that you're getting to witness Lily in these authentic reactions, like with me, I feel like it's very powerful.
Yeah. And so amazing as like an invitation for you as well, to like, if you do look into your chart, if you do receive a reading, to like really challenge yourself to be really present with everything that's said. I'm like honed in on Jess right now. Like my attention is here. And like that is what's allowing for, the flow to really come through.
Yes, absolutely. And you will feel that resonance or non-resonance,
Yes.
you will feel either one. And that is how, even for me, I was like, before this, I was sharing with Lily, I was like, I don't know if I want to share, my true sidereal, or I don't know if I want to share true sidereal astrology or if I want to share Western. And like, I went ahead and did some Western readings and I was so disconnected. Like, my mind kept wandering. Like it was like crazy. And then in this reading, I've been like, just like, it's like I'm in a vortex.
Yeah. And the way you're talking is like you're in a vortex too. You're so in flow. You guys can obviously tell she's so in flow, and everything is so intentional. I feel like I'm the one kind of like bumbling around trying to like keep my footing when it comes to this stuff, just because of like the influx. But it's like you are like the sacred, strong, grounded messenger in this.
Oh, thank you. I mean, it's a lot to receive. Like
It is.
when I first received it, I kid you not, I was shooketh. And it actually took me a while to even like get a reading, because I wanted a reading from someone who practiced true sidereal, not from,
Yeah.
because obviously Western astrologers, they don't do this. And it actually took me a while to like even muster up the like willingness to do it. And then when I did it, I was like, where the fuck has that been all my life? And
Yeah.
it was just been like, there's been no turning back. And I've listened to the recording like 4 times since receiving it. And I always intuitively go back and listen to it. And it's just like, there's always something new to uncover.
Love that.
Yeah, I was all over. So I feel you.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm just trying to stay with it here. That's my goal. So I
You're
feel
doing
like
great.
thank
You're doing
you. Thank you
great.
so much.
Okay, so let's talk about what it means for the moon to be in Leo, though. Oh,
Mm.
Leo is such a yummy energy. And I so see this for you. Like as time, okay, I'm gonna not put my subjectivity in it yet. Okay. So for those listening, Leo is the sign of the lion. This is a sign that represents the heart. It represents courage. It represents self-expression. Like Leo is such a I mean, they're all beautiful signs, but Leo is like also the sign of the performer, loving to just express yourself. Like that is Leo. And in a way that like really lights you up. So, whoever has a Leo, no matter what your Leo placement is, it's really just about finding what lights you up and what gives you joy and what you are passionate about. Leo is so passionate. And it's really going to be important for you with this being your moon sign. It's going to be so important for you to immerse yourself in these passions. And because this is going to be what makes you feel most at home within yourself, because your moon is your inner world. And Leo's also a very inner childlike energy. So with this placement, I would say you approach your personal and private life with a lot of passion, a lot of warm-heartedness, being like kind of humorous and goofy and like that side.
Yes.
Yeah, I was gonna say I've seen that side of you like come out the more I've gotten to know you. But it's kind of like that side of you is really reserved for the people who like know you, who really know.
Definitely. Oh my gosh, definitely. Yes. You've seen that, but only in small bits.
Yeah.
But I usually don't bring that out with normal relationships, but with my intimate connections, my family, and with you and some of my other like very, very close friends. You can see that side of
And
me for better or worse.
it's so interesting just based on because I was reflecting on this when I was like interpreting your chart and I was like, oh, wow. Because the first time that we ever connected on Zoom, you were very like came off very almost like more serious, I would say, more just like no bullshit kind of, you know what I mean? Like that was like the way you came off. And which is not, it's a good thing. And it also is so representative of like being an Ophiuchus rising and with so much of your public image being in Virgo, like that's very like so embodied of both of those. But then the more that we've gotten to know each other, and for those listening, Lily and I send each other voice messages on the reg. And I will
So much.
literally crack up at your voice messages. And I'm like, who is this girl? Like,
I know. It's funny even for me because I'm like, wait, what? Like to myself a little bit because I'm just
like, I love it. I love it.
yeah, I can definitely hold those two poles, but it's definitely something that feels so nice to be in a connection with someone that I trust enough for that silly, playful side of me to come out. And I've got that reaction before, for sure, where people were like, "Oh, I didn't peg you like that. Oh yeah, like I'm actually like I'm fun." Like
Yeah, you are though. I'm like,
yeah, but like I don't feel like maybe that's like not like the first impression that I give. Like I feel like I'm able to like bring that into my Instagram community like more and more like the more I get to like know my clients and stuff like that. But I don't like come in like as like I've never been like a class clown or like anything like that. Like I'm like much more reserved when it
yes.
comes to like those kinds of situations, like those like kind of things. But and it's funny because I always thought that was like my Sagittarius energy because like my mom thinks I'm so funny. Like she thinks I'm hilarious. Like I mean she's my mom, right? So like what does that mean really? But she thinks I'm fucking hilarious. And I'm always like, oh, like it must be my Sagittarius energy like coming out. But like that's very interesting to think of it as like my Leo and like something that is like not as prominent about my personality. That's like more on, reserved, like you said, for like the more like intimate connections. So
Mhm.
I'm loving this.
Oh my God, I'm so glad. And this was the point in your chart that I was feeling for you, like when I was interpreting it, because I knew you resonated with your Sagittarius energy in your chart. And
Yeah.
I was like, this is the point. I was like, this is like that like Sagittarius. It's actually your Leo moon. Like
Yeah.
that's what I felt for you. Which you just confirmed. But it's like because Sagittarius and Leo are both fire signs as well. So, and it makes sense why we get along so well because I'm a Sagittarius moon.
Okay.
And
Okay. Okay.
like
Okay.
that makes sense. And it's so interesting because we're both fire moons and we're both water suns.
Wait, what's your sun?
Oh, I'm a Scorpio sun.
Okay. Okay. I already so see that. Like that's like that was like the most no-brainer piece of information that I think I've like ever received. And I don't know where that's coming from, but like when you said that, I'm just like, oh yeah, obviously. Like that's literally
Right?
what like literally what my first thoughts was obviously. Obvious.
That's
Like just
how
a
I
huge
felt.
obvious.
Because like for me, I was like, I don't for some reason I was like, I definitely resonate with Sagittarius, but I was like, for some reason I
Yeah.
don't resonate with it as my sun sign because that's
Hmm.
what I am in Western is a Sagittarius sun. And then when I was like, oh, okay, I'm like, this makes so much more sense.
Okay. 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 Yeah. And then, okay, I have to say something else about the Leo because there's been a recent development in my,
Yes.
side personal life. I used to be, really into like singing and performing, and I loved it. I freaking loved it so much. And I recently had like this serendipitous kind of experience with the universe where I like got into a Broadway show for free, whole thing, and the passion like reignited. And I was like, I need to be a part of a show. Like, I need it. And so I like came back and that happened when I was traveling. It happened on travel. And yeah. And so I came back and I to where I live, I tried out for a show. And so I actually am getting into a show. And it's something that I loved. I loved as like high schooler, I'm junior high, like it's just something that I loved being a part of that. It just like set my soul like on fire. Like I was just like, this is so fun. Like it was just so fun for me. So, that's what I have to say about that.
That is so Leo because if for those listening earlier, like Leo is also the zodiac sign of like the performer. So wow.
And you know what's weird? I don't have any Leo at all in my Western chart. Um, but I think Leo is still in my ninth house in my Western chart. I think, yeah, yeah. So, but I don't have a placement there. And I
Mhm.
always thought that was kind of weird because I was like always like, like I really love performing, but like I'm not gonna let this stop me. I'm still gonna perform. Like I'm, like I even before I like knew about this, I was like, oh, I love acting and dancing and
Yeah.
singing and like being part of a production. Like I love that. But I always kind of looked to my chart to be like, like I wonder where this passion is coming from and could never really like pinpoint it all
It's like
in
so
perfect
literal for you too, because like Leo is also like such a Leo and Sagittarius are both very passionate signs. Um,
timing. Okay.
and it's because it's like fire is like passion. And so it's so interesting. And also I just feel like travel for you is so big. And like,
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like everyone says like, yeah, you expand when you travel for everyone, but like I feel like just based on the experiences that you've shared with me since I've known you, it's like, whoa, like when you travel, like shit opens for you.
She's right. Like it's nuts.
It's pretty nuts.
Yeah, it's nuts. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's like having, and the moon placement is a big, I mean, it's your big three, right? Like in astrology, no matter what system you're using, you have what's called your big three, your sun, moon, and your rising. And they are like the most important parts of your chart. And so the moon sign is like so big. And so with that being in the ninth house for you, like that explains why. And then also the Sagittarian energy that we already talked about.
As in the first house.
First house and Jupiter.
Okay.
And you have
And the
Neptune.
and the first house is like the body or like your personality. Can you
Yeah.
share?
Yeah. So there's like internal and external expressions of each house. And so the internal expression of the first house is all about like how you step into your self-awareness, your confidence, and really like understanding like who am I, you know? And then on as an external expression, the first house is, again, when you think about the self, it's your body, it's how you present, it's like your looks, it's how you present yourself, like literally what you wear, your hair, your makeup, like that's all first house related.
Okay. Okay. That makes sense for me because I tend towards like more like boho type of stuff.
Oh, yeah, that is so Sagittarius.
Yeah. And I have curly hair, which I feel like is like maybe more of a Sagittarius thing. I don't know.
I don't know. I haven't really
Yeah.
looked at like actual physical, but that is so, I mean, just because like for those listening, Sagittarius, like one of the archetypes is the gypsy. So that's why Lily was like, yeah, I'm boho. That's like so gypsy, like kind of, you know, like it like ties together. And so that makes so much sense. I actually like haven't thought that's interesting. I'm like thinking about that for myself, but
I feel like you definitely dress like a Scorpio.
yeah. Well, the
Yeah.
Scorpio is my son, but I'm a
Oh,
Leo
right.
rising.
Wait, you're a Leo rising. Oh, so that's your first house.
That's my first house. But I'm like, how do Leos dress? I don't really know.
You know what's crazy, Jess? You know what's crazy? The adornment piece.
Oh my God. Yeah, because one of the archetypes of Leo is the king. Oh,
Okay, so for
wow.
the listeners, Jess and I had a session, and actually, I think this was just like an Instagram live where I was tuning in for people. And the first word that came in for Jess, and this was the first time I ever tuned into her energy, was adornment. Or no, she told me after the session that she had received a message of adornment being an important piece. But when I tuned into her energy, I was seeing her wearing like these like beautiful like headdress pieces like with beads and stuff. Like I can't remember exactly what I told you, but it was just like this energy of like yeah, adornment, like basically just like putting on like jewels. I like saw you with like anklets and but mostly like these like beautiful little like headdress like beaded kind of like things. And then afterwards she was like, yeah, adornment is a thing. So like that's definitely on track, I feel like.
Oh my God, that's such a good point because, and that's actually still something that I have not explored. Um, because yeah, the adornment is what came through when I did like an Akashic Records meditation,
Right. Okay.
access my Akashic Records, and the guides were just like, that's all they said. They were just like adornment. And I was like, I didn't even know really what that word meant at the time. This was like a few years ago. And I had to
Yeah.
like Google it, and it was like of royalty. And then I had something like royalty and like jewels and like adorning yourself, obviously, right? And I had something else come through recently that was like on the subject of royalty, but I forget what it was. Anyways, I feel like I need to try that. It's just so far out of my comfort zone.
I love it for you. Like I
Oh,
think I really love it for you already. Like I can already like see it on you.
it's probably out of my comfort zone because my Chiron is there.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah,
anyway,
like I just like saw that like so clearly too. Like just like beautiful little like headdress beads and things like that. Like ah, I love it for you. Anyway,
explore this. Okay, so it's really cool getting things reflected back to me too, because I'm like kind of blind with my own chart. So that's really interesting. Um, wow. Okay. The only other thing that we haven't talked about was Pluto in the 12th house. So what I'll just really quickly touch on for you is like Pluto is it's the planet of transformation, like how we experience death and rebirth.
hmm.
Yours is in Scorpio. So what I would say is that's really embracing matters of the occult, femininity, like really going about it, kind of like allowing yourself to be a little taboo when it comes to your transformation and embracing that almost, you know? Um, but then with it being in the 12th house is all about the dream space and
Wow.
uh like the subconscious. So like doing a lot of subconscious healing. Um, you know, even like hypnotherapy, stuff like that can be really, really beneficial for you.
Hmm.
When you're going through matters of like self-transformation and even like meditation and just like that self-isolation, like retreating to be with the self, that would be really important.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, that resonates. Hypnotherapy is something I've heard of before, so I'm gonna look into that.
Yeah, you've never done it.
No.
I feel like it definitely with this placement, I would say definitely when you feel called, you know, like when you're
Yeah.
maybe going through like, okay, I'm in this like death rebirth process, that could be a really powerful time for you to do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that definitely resonates. And yeah, I think yeah, I've heard that term. I don't even know like exactly what it is, so I'll have to like I said, like look it up.
Yeah.
But one thing I was like I did have like a quick question
Mhm.
before we wrap up. So it's just been so interesting like looking at the chart and like seeing the differences and the similarities between Western. And one thing that did hit me was like my Venus placement is the same as Western.
We didn't talk about Venus.
Yeah, and I know we're like kind of wrapping up on time, so if you just want to like touch on it quickly or we can touch on it after, whatever you think is best. But um it's like some of the placements are the same and then like some of them aren't, which I think is just so interesting.
Yeah, yeah. And that is because of the different sizes of the constellations. So Taurus is a longer constellation, and you can even see that on the
Mhm.
chart here, whereas like Scorpio and Ophiuchus are so small. And like
Yeah.
um even where's Cancer? Cancer is a smaller constellation as well. Aries is only like 3 weeks long.
Okay.
So it makes sense for certain some placements may be like true placements in that aspect, which is actually really great.
Yeah.
So your
Okay.
Venus is in Taurus in Western.
It is. Mhm.
Oh, so interesting. Okay. And that's actually really beautiful because Venus is like it's the planet of love. It's the planet of our values and also actually speaks a lot to how we connect to and relate to money. And so like with yours in Taurus, that speaks a lot to like when it comes to love, for instance, that speaks a lot to like really being drawn to someone who is really self-reliant, someone who is really like good with their money, someone who's very also really enjoys in like the simple pleasures in life. Like I see it just being someone that can really help you to do that as well, to just kind of be like, oh, like I'm walking outside and wow, I'm just so fucking grateful for the sun that's on my skin right now. That's very Venus and Taurus.
Yeah, that's very me for
I
sure.
see that for you because like your connection to the earth also, earth is earth's zodiac sign is Taurus.
Wow.
So um yeah, that just speaks so much to that. And I see that as like you really valuing the earth um and also being resourceful so and like cultivating a self-reliance for yourself as well.
Mm. Yeah, I think that I definitely do have that like naturally, like being like pretty good with, my resources. Like I've just heard reflections of that from people in my life in the past. But yeah, definitely resonates when in terms of like sun on my skin, that type of thing. I can definitely connect to that.
Yeah, it's like connecting to nature and also like being just very indulged in the simple pleasures in life, indulging your senses. That
Mm.
is so Taurus, like really, loving the food that you're eating, like engulfing yourself in your house in really good smells and just really like indulging the senses. That is so Taurus because Taurus is really grounded. It's really like, again, of the earth.
Yeah.
And that can really help you with like all that Pisces energy that you have too, because it's like, I know you've shared that sometimes you feel like you just, well, you've said something about you just go, wait, like real deep. And so
Yeah.
it's almost like this Venus placement can really help you with that grounding aspect as well, along with the Virgo energy that you have.
Yeah. Totally. Totally.
Yeah. A Taurus is a little more seductive. Like
Mhm.
it's than Virgo. Virgo is more like analytical, methodical. Taurus is like, like yummy. I'm gonna like eat this piece of fucking cake and I'm gonna really fucking enjoy it and love it. And also just like honestly, Taurus is really like luxury, like enjoying the luxuries of life, just seeing life as so beautiful is so Taurus.
Mm. Yeah, that's funny because my cognition in human design is taste. And I've been really playing with that. And like, holy cow, like when I really taste stuff, it's like I'm so much more intuitive. It's like activating the senses is such an avenue to heightened intuition, heightened connection with the body, obviously. But it's something that we kind of turn off, honestly, because we are just in too much of a fight or flight response societally to maintain connection to those senses because it's not of like utmost importance. So if you do feel if you're listening and you're like I don't have a central connection,
Yeah.
that's totally okay and it's not something to, be hard on yourself about. It's just bringing it in those small moments has been like oh so good for me. It's like it gives my brain a break. It gives my body, that like 5 minutes of nurturing energy, like nurturance. And it's a great avenue for just that reconnection, that centering, nervous system regulation piece.
Yeah, which is so interesting too, because you know how I said Mars speaks more to our inner masculine, Venus speaks more to our inner feminine. And so for you,
Mhm.
it's like that's really turned on. Yeah, for like you getting into that intuitive, like receptive state. That's cool.
Okay, that's crazy because yesterday I was trying to feel into a decision and I'm like, I feel like I just need to eat something. Like I feel like I need to like that's literally
So literal.
yeah, and it is weird because I did like I ate something and I was like feeling into it and it was easier to like come to the answer.
Well, and that speaks to your taste cognition.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Oh, oh my gosh, that's
So
cool.
when I say that it is a pathway to intuition, it actually may be. And I think that this is all like kind of subjective to the individual. So
Yes.
like looking into your kind of charts around that can be like helpful in navigating, but even not and just like trying it out and being like, it's like almost like when you can activate a sense, like a either it's smell, sight, taste. For me, it's taste. It just for me, it just kind of like heightens my like awareness, like perception a little bit. And yeah, I've been kind of like interested in that recently. So interesting that you brought this up.
It's so cool when there's like congruencies across different systems, different key.
Mm-hmm.
It's really cool.
Yes. And I feel like we were actually thinking about doing a little like mini episode on sidereal astrology and Western astrology and just what Jess has to share around, the differences there. Because again, we want to just offer this as a perspective, not as a, you know, blueprint or grid of how you should be living your life. And ultimately, at the end of the day, just providing you the insights and information that you can utilize to make your own decision when it comes to what system you want to follow, if any. So, we are kind of planning to do a little mini episode to just kind of share a little bit more background around these systems and maybe even weave in how, human design is connected to these systems as well,
Mhm.
to just kind of give you some background here. Obviously, I think there's so much info within this episode in terms of how you can apply any of the archetypes that Jess described to your own charts, but just taking a little bit of a higher level as well.
Yeah, definitely. So stay tuned for that. And then I am feeling like it's aligned to offer readings using this system. And so, for anyone listening, if you felt the call, I'll put information on how to book with me in the show notes. And you can always just reach out to me on Instagram. I'm keeping things pretty casual right now. So you can always reach out to me on Instagram and we can set something up.
Okay, so exciting. And just so you know, like this is definitely a lesser known system as we discussed in the beginning. So reach out to Jess with like any questions that you have. Like this is kind of new. Like we're kind of opening a new door here and there aren't that many sidereal astrologists even or astrologers even out there as far as I know. So you're lucky. that you have Jess often.
And I'm still learning. I'm still exploring. And so, yeah, it would be an honor to like even chat with whoever's listening if it feels resonant for you, just to even see how this lands and how it manifests for you in your
Yeah.
life.
Oh, so exciting. And thank you, Jess, for bringing this to me. Thank you for the reading today. You'll be hearing from me. We'll be going back and forth.
Oh my God, I'm so
But yeah, but honestly, the way you deliver, the way that, you speak about these things, I've told Jess before, and I'll say it for the listeners as well. Like for me, on the receiving end of this, it feels like such a safe, non-judgmental space to receive from Jess in this way. And almost like she just kind of like holds you through the whole thing. And as she mentioned, it can feel big, it can feel big. And whenever we receive these kinds of transmissions that are, these systems of divine support, or however you kind of want to view these systems, it can be really helpful to have someone who's not just going to plant the information in front of you and leave you hanging. It's much more of an embodied process with Jess. So for those of you who are just listening in and not really like seeing our interaction, I just want you to know like this was a very like held space, and I'm so grateful for it.
Oh, that means so much coming from you, because Lily is like, oh, her discernment, it's on point. So thank you. And thank you for being so open to receive this and to share it with our listeners. I mean, that was beautiful.
Yeah, totally. I feel like you guys know me pretty well at this point, for better or worse. But I'm honestly just so honored and excited to share these pieces of myself with this audience, because this podcast for me feels like a very personal platform and space that I've been longing for a while. And just for you guys to see this, Leo moon in me, this fun, silly side. So thanks for receiving that.
Yay. Oh, I loved every word of that. So thank you guys so much for listening. Reach out to us. Let us know what you thought. Like email the show, or you can reach out to us on Instagram. If you enjoyed this episode, send it to a friend, leave us a review. We appreciate all the love.
Yes, totally. And we will catch you in the next episode.